1. Buckle up, because this story is an absolute doozy that spans nearly 4 years. Some backstory that's relevant to the story. In December of 2020, my father agreed to put his mother into a nursing home to protect his sister, my aunt, from an elder abuse investigation and getting my grandmother moved into state care. Because of my aunt's negligence, my grandmother had been hospitalized 3 times in 2 months. Once for a severe UTI, another time for an infected wound because my aunt secured my grandmother's diaper with duct tape, and the final time because of second-degree burns after my aunt left a heating pad on my grandmother's back overnight. Ironically, in October 2021, my aunt would end up in a nursing home after she burned herself with a heating pad, and then didn't get medical treatment until the burn was badly infected. In January 2022, my grandmother passed away at the age of 94 years old. In my grandparents' will, they split their estate between their 2 children 50-50. However, because neither my father nor aunt was on the deed to my grandparents' house, it was signed over to a probate lawyer who would be tasked with selling the house. When my father started going through his mother's affairs in February 2022, he discovered that the estate was on the verge of taking the house because the only bills my aunt bothered paying were the electric and cable bills, and she hadn't paid property taxes since December 2020. My father also discovered that there were 2 massive liens on the house totaling almost $200,000. One from the nursing home my grandmother had been in because my aunt hadn't paid them either, the other because my aunt convinced my grandmother to take a home equity loan out on the house so she could buy a car. Initially, she was only supposed to take what she needed for the car, or roughly $6,000. However, my aunt went behind my grandmother's back and would end up taking the full $100,000 the bank offered them. My aunt had been able to co-sign for the loan, so she was authorized to take the full amount. She also never made any of the monthly payments on the loan because she legitimately thought loans were money banks give people for free. No strings attached. My aunt never told anyone what she did with the remaining $94,000, but the rest of the family is suspecting that she gambled it away at local casinos. My aunt was also given full access to my grandmother's bank account, which she had almost completely drained before my grandmother passed, meaning my father had to pay any outstanding bills out of his own pocket, though he was eventually reimbursed by the lawyer. Some point between late January 2022 and March 2022, in an attempt to buy herself some time to recover enough to leave the nursing home, and thinking that the house couldn't be sold if someone was living in it, my aunt convinced one of her friends to move into my grandmother's vacant house unbeknownst to my father and the lawyer. As you can imagine, things got messy when my father found out. Initially, my aunt told my father that the man was there to take care of her 2 cats. However, even after my aunt was court-ordered to sign her 2 cats over to my father due to neglect and abuse, the man refused to leave. Both cats have been treated and rehomed and are doing well. We eventually found out he had broken his lease, moved out of his apartment, and had nowhere else to go except his and my aunt's daughter's house, who adamantly refused to let her father move in with her. Around April, my parents started to deep clean the disgustingly dirty house with the man still living there, and he did everything in his power to obstruct my parents' efforts. He'd call up claiming he was sick with COVID, which my parents almost always called his bluff on, since he was physically disabled and never left the house, nor had anyone but my parents visit. One day he told my mother, "Well, Sharon," my entitled aunt, "said we'd be able to live here forever, and that her brother didn't have the balls to kick me out." Well, my mom told my father what had been said, and the very next day, my father gave the man an ultimatum. My father told the man, "Either you leave on your own by May 1st or I'll have you evicted." The man chose the eviction route because my aunt told him they can't legally evict a disabled person, and he believed her. He ended up having to move in with his daughter, who is no longer speaking to my aunt because my aunt has ruined that woman's livelihood on multiple occasions, but that's a whole other story. However, before he left the house, per my aunt's orders, he stole several valuable pieces of jewelry, including a box of rings that had been willed to her cousins. We were able to get the stolen jewelry back in late 2023 after the probate lawyer had to send the police to retrieve it, which is another doozy of a story. Because of the whole squatter incident, we missed a massive housing boom where houses were selling for significantly more than they were worth. And the house was put on the market during a slump, and the house sold for almost $150,000 less than what it was worth. And it led to another lengthy legal battle with my aunt because she refused to sell or throw out any of her furniture in another attempt to buy enough time to leave the nursing home until she was court-ordered to do so. Given what the house sold for, and deducting the lien from the home equity loan, the lien the nursing home put on the house had been dismissed by a judge. In the end, my father ended up with just under $60,000, while my aunt ended up with just under $50,000. My aunt got less because the probate lawyer charged her more than he charged my father because she was the one who had drawn things out for so long. Around that time, my aunt had been deemed unfit to make decisions for herself by a judge and several of her doctors, and ended up signing her half of the inheritance to my father to avoid losing it to the nursing home she was in. My aunt passed away on August 1st at the age of 68 from multi-organ failure caused by years of heavy smoking, ignoring her diabetes, and refusing to consent to a surgery that would have likely saved her life. We didn't have a funeral for her. We simply had her cremated, and her ashes, along with pictures and other personal belongings, were given to her older daughter. My aunt's younger daughter tried to sue my father for the rest of her mother's inheritance, but the suit was quickly dropped, since the money my aunt had inherited after her mother's death had already been signed over to my father. So my aunt's daughter had no right to it. Our one saving grace in this whole fiasco was that my aunt was in a nursing home for the entire process. Otherwise, it would have been significantly messier. There's a lot I didn't go into for the sake of not typing out an almost literal novel, but I'll gladly elaborate on anything I can. Thanks for listening. 2. To set the scene, I was recently at a large grocery store that rhymes with flyer. They have really long grocery aisles that are split in the middle with a perpendicular space for better flow-through. I go absurdly early in the morning because the music is played at a quieter volume, and the only people out in the store are workers stocking the shelves and retirees who wake up before sunrise. Usually, I'm happy to help when asked nicely. Everything from pulling something heavy into a cart, reaching the top shelf, even laying on the floor to collect glasses that have been accidentally kicked beneath a shelf. The older regulars and I exchange idle pleasantries, and they know me as one of the usual people around. I'm in the cracker and cookie aisle, and a stock employee is pulling a large metal dolly towards the back of the store, with a stack of deconstructed boxes piled on it. Before she can get to the end of the aisle, 2 mobility scooters round the corner and block her path, and this wasn't accidental. It's clear the scooters were lined up to intentionally block the entire aisle. It was a man and a woman. The man looked down at his phone, trying to ignore the madness, while the woman smugly crossed her arms. She was the human embodiment of a sour grape. I'm towards the front of the aisle, but can hear this lady exclaim that since the stock person works there, she must do this woman's shopping for her. She's shaking a paper grocery list at the stock person, and she has the exact same facial expression as the gif of the angry little girl shaking a hairbrush. The poor stock person is trying to explain that she doesn't work in customer service, that she is simply there to stock shelves, but the grumpy grape isn't having it. Eventually, the stock person loudly exclaims in frustration, "I don't have time for this!" and pushes the dolly backwards into the middle aisle gap, circumventing the blockade. This retreat is met with flying obscenities and threats of talking to management. But the stock person moves quickly enough that the scooters can't reposition in time. I can hear the employee's dolly move down an unblocked aisle and into the back of the store out of reach. If you thought that was the end of it, oh dear listener, you are wrong. The woman then loudly exclaims, "Well, just get that other girl to help us," with an annoyed huff. I almost instantly realize that I am the only person left in the aisle, and I am dressed very similarly to the stock person, jeans and t-shirt. For the briefest of moments, I did think about explaining to the woman that I didn't work there. I did have a shopping cart after all. But the daunting stories through Reddit have taught me that sensible explanations often lead to conflict, and sometimes even assault. This cantankerous woman could fill a Karen bingo card with her exploits. I knew my immediate peril and quickly moved in the opposite direction, scurrying around the corner before she could even try to flag me down with her shopping list. She even tried loudly clicking her fingers like I was a dog. It was genuinely surprising how loudly she snapped her fingers with her dried-up witch hands. But that probably is due to a lot of practice from treating people like slaves. You can call me a jerk for not helping my elders, but there's no way I'm going to get involved with someone who wants me to gather her groceries while she yells at me. By the time I got to the self-checkout register, only the man was in a scooter, and the woman was bagging and checking groceries on her feet. I make no claims or assumptions about her physical capabilities, but I did think it was weird that she ditched the scooters somewhere instead of having someone scan her groceries for her. Regardless of the time of day, there's always 2 people helping at self-checkout, and there's a checkout lane with another employee available. As I passed her register to do my own self-checkout, she gave me such a venomous stare, but thankfully she kept most of the insults under her breath instead of choosing a confrontation. So thank you, Redditors. You taught me how to spot a dangerous Karen in the wild, and I avoided the situation. 5. When I was a young man, back in 2007, I would finally find myself moving away from my hometown, Gary, Indiana. My sister moved to a little town in Connecticut a couple of years prior, and she was always telling me about how beautiful it was. The people were nice, it was a quiet area, and it was a far cry from Gary. I was getting sick of making sure I looked as imposing as possible every time I decided to go for a walk beyond 6 p.m. The idea of not having to remove the faceplate to my car's stereo every single night before going to bed and making sure all my doors were deadbolted, and my trusty Louisville Slugger wasn't too far away from my bed, just in case, seemed like a sweet deal. I absolutely jumped at the idea and didn't hesitate to tell her yes, but it came with a catch. We had and still have this mutual friend. She just finished the process of going through a messy breakup and needed a change of scenery herself. Throughout childhood, especially during her teenage years, she spent a fair amount of time couch-surfing within our friends group. Before anybody gets any weird ideas, no, she was never problematic. If anything, she was one of those friends, and still is, that most people hope and pray for. Her home was chaotic at best, and without getting too much dirt in the laundry, so to speak, her parents weren't really fit to be parents. Of course, we were teenagers in the 1990s, and most of our parents were in the know as to how chaotic things were for her under that roof, and their doors were always open. Her name is Charlene. If I had to give you an idea as to the type of person she is and her sense of style, she's like a cross between Lily Munster and Abby from NCIS. Super smart, incredibly laid back, and a wicked sense of humor. To this day, she is also a practicing Wiccan. To enlighten the unenlightened, it's nothing like you would see in movies and television. She's not a wannabe Nancy from The Craft. Hell, she's not even Vicky Valancourt, who coincidentally is played by the same actress. She's in tune with nature, respects her environment, respects people, and has a different subset of beliefs from most people, nothing more, nothing less. With that out of the way, I approached her about my sister's offer, and she decided to mull it out over lunch. We were sitting there munching on some paninis, and as she takes a bite, she has this look of consideration on her face. As she picks up her glass of iced tea and goes in for a sip, she let me have it. "Yeah, John, I'm in. I need a change of scenery. Everything I see reminds me of that piece of crap. I was thinking about leaving town anyway, and I think it would be a lot easier if I went with people I knew." I gave her a big hug and called my sister as soon as I got back to the house. Once I was able to make sure that A, the company for which I was employed at the time had a location in or around that area, and B, they would be willing and able to transfer my job to said area, I just had to wait. And thankfully the chips fell in my favor in round about 5 days. From that point, I just had to get a moving truck situated, and Charlene and I were on our way. We were in a suburb just outside of Greenwich, Connecticut. It was a far cry from the mean streets of Gary. If I'm being totally honest, the place struck me as a nature lover's dream, with a bit of retirement community sprinkled in. Charlene and I couch-surfed at my sister's for about a month while we looked around for a rental, And one morning in my sister's diner, we're having breakfast, and she introduces me to Walter. Walter was an older gentleman, late 60s to early 70s, portly, well-dressed, and he was almost a dead ringer for Wilford Brimley, complete with the wire-framed glasses. He came across as a pleasant gentleman. As four of us sat and chatted over Belgian waffles and coffee, he let us know that he had inherited his sister's place and had turned it into a fairly nice and affordable rental. Keep in mind, this wasn't necessarily an area I would describe as cheap in the living expenses department. So when he told us he was only asking $850 a month for a 2-bedroom, 1.5-bathroom style rancher with a large backyard and some amenities, we had to see to believe. Our interest was piqued. We made arrangements to go over the next day once Charlene knew she could come into her job at the antique store a little bit late. Of course, her bosses were a sweet older couple who completely understood and had absolutely no problem as long as it was within a reasonable amount of time. And so a little bit around noon the next day, we were checking this place out. It was a little on the cramped side. Each bedroom had enough space for a dresser, an end table, and a queen-sized bed at best. But the house had hardwood floors throughout, a nice-sized shower in the master bathroom, and the living room and kitchenette was recently updated. The thing that sweetened the deal, not only was the backyard absolutely massive, there was a reading and lounging area set up under the large weeping willow tree in the backyard, and Walter had recently installed a fire brick oven and grill combo for his sister that she never had the chance to use due to her unfortunate passing, which happened days after Walter finished the project. So as far as we are concerned, $850 was more than reasonable. We took Walter up on the offer, and we didn't look back. For the next several months we lived blissfully. Charlene was working 5 days a week at the little antique store up the road, and making fairly good money just making sure the books were in order. And though my job at the big box place could be stressful, it was nowhere near as bad as my previous location. Walter was punctual about picking up rent on the first, and he always made sure we were home beforehand. Whenever he made his rounds to pick up the rent, he was always pleasant and had time for a bit of playful banter or conversation. He was a great landlord. But then something changed. Shortly after winter started to disperse, making way for spring, Walter came to get his rent as per usual. Charlene happens to be off that day, and I just left for work. She came by in my lunch break to let me know the rent had been taken care of for the month, but Walter didn't even make eye contact with her, let alone stop to strike up conversation as per usual. I told her it wasn't a big deal. Maybe he was just having a bad day. They creep up on us, after all. And she left it at that. The next month's situation was just the opposite. I'd learned enough over time to take a staycation at home, and while Charlene worked, I figured I would vegetate and watch some old horror films. I get a knock at the door, and standing before me as I open is Walter. The thing is, he's looking kind of disheveled. I was used to seeing this well-dressed older gentleman standing in front of me, wearing a pair of high-end dress pants and a button-up dress shirt with a complimentary blazer jacket. Instead, he's wearing a dirty t-shirt with what I can only describe as paint stains on the front and a pair of equally beaten-up jeans. He's wearing a pair of work boots with the steel toes starting to show through, and my first initial thought is, okay, maybe he got another property and he's working on it. Not a biggie. Without even so much as a hello, he puts his hand out and says, "Rent money, hurry it up, I've got things to do." His demeanor went from pleasant old grandfather to that gruff uncle the family has a tendency to avoid. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but in the back of my mind I'm thinking about his age, and worrying that maybe there's a chance he's experiencing onset dementia. I try not to let my mind wander too much as I invite him in and tell him the rent money is in my room and I'll just be a moment getting it. When I come out of my room, cash in hand, he's walking around with a sour expression on his face when I realize he's staring at a couple of framed posters in my living room. A couple of years prior, I went to a horror convention with an old friend and got a Hellraiser poster signed by Doug Bradley and had my photos taken with a few horror icons I grew up admiring. He's standing there looking at these pictures and poster combination when he chimes in with, "Can't stand this garbage,"
Why would you put it on your wall? Better yet, what did you use to hang them up? If you used nails, it could come out of your security deposit. You know that, right?
I stood there for a second, mildly confused. I got the okay for this months ago and everything seemed okay then. No, I didn't use anything that would have put holes in the wall. I used those 3M tacky hooks. No need to worry about that. Walter walked up to the picture frames and gave them a quick inspection.
You got lucky, kid,
he said as he pocketed the money and made his way out my front door. Now, what Charlene was talking about was crystal clear to me. I don't know who the hell that man was, but he was a far cry from the man whom we initially rented this dwelling. I was feeling uneasy. My gut was telling me that this was a sign of things to come, and unfortunately, my gut was right. Fast forward 2 months. Spring started giving way to summer, and Charlene and I had one of those instances where we had a day off that coincided with one another. After spending all that time in that house eyeing down the fire brick oven, I finally decided to pull the trigger and make a deep dish for the two of us to split over lunch. It's the first of the month, and we're both anticipating Walter's arrival. I already had the money in my pocket. I'm putting the finishing touches on the pizza while Charlene sits underneath the weeping willow tree, attentively reading an Alex Cross novel. I tell her I'm getting ready to put toppings on the pizza, and she makes her way over to let me know what she wants on her half. And about 3/4 of the way to where I'm standing, she lets out an audible "Ow!" and slaps her neck. "Damn, mosquitoes are out already," she says with a chuckle. No sooner had she finished that sentence, I look up to see the backyard gate by the tree swing open. Lo and behold, Walter comes sauntering into the yard. He had that look, like he was having a day where he just didn't want to say anything to anybody. All business, no pleasure. I'm reaching into my pocket to get the money when I look up and I see Charlene with a look of panic on her face. The entire area under her jaw is starting to swell violently. She's turning purple, and she's struggling to breathe. I know what's going on at this point. It wasn't a mosquito, it was a bee, and she's deathly allergic. Walter is still standing there by the table, and her purse, which contains her EpiPen, is less than 2 feet away from him. "Grab her purse! Grab it now!" I start screaming. The severity of the situation is obvious to anybody with eyes. But Walter, he just stands there with this stupid grin on his face. "What? You waiting for an invitation? She needs her EpiPen. Grab her damn purse!" I yell in frustration. I watch the expression on his face change to one of pure indignance.
"I don't know who you think you're talking to, boy, but where I'm from, we respect our elders."
I bite my tongue so hard it almost comes off. I want to knock this guy on his butt, but instead I do the rational thing and dart towards the table in order to grab the purse myself. I get over to my friend now laying on the ground and almost unconscious, and I jab the EpiPen into her thigh, delivering the dose she needs to clear her airways. Fun fact, just because somebody who is having a severe bout of anaphylaxis gets that shot of epinephrine, it doesn't necessarily mean they're out of the water. She had a severe reaction, and at the very least, I had to take her to the clinic at the edge of town. I look up at Walter, and he's standing there with his hand outstretched. I throw the money at his feet. "Take your damn cash. She could have died. What the hell is your problem?" Walter stares me up and down for a minute before saying,
"Well, if that's how you're going to be, I've got something for you."
"There's your rent. It's all there. Count it if you need to. I need to get her some medical attention, but please act insulted because I got angry by your inaction." Walter bent over and picked up the wad of cash, stuffing it into his pocket as he had over the past few months, and he made a finger gun motion at me while clicking his teeth. I didn't have time to think about it. Right now, the most important thing was to make sure Charlene was going to be okay. The reaction was so bad that the doctor ended up telling her she needed to take a couple of days off work. She didn't need to be hospitalized, but they wanted her to take it easy for the rest of the weekend, at the very least. I called her bosses and explained what happened, and they were more than understanding. They even took time out of the next couple of days to check up on her. Good people through and through. But the following evening, as we were sitting back watching reruns of In Living Color, we got a loud rap on the door. I'm not talking about a heavy knock, we are talking heavy banging. What's this happy horse manure, I say to myself as I walk over to the door. When I get there, I look through the fisheye lens overlooking the front porch. There, in his absolutely hammered glory, is Walter. He's swaying to and fro, almost falling over. His hair is disheveled, his shirt is unevenly tucked, and I see him holding a piece of yellow leaflet paper in his hand.
"I know you two can hear me,"
he yells on the other side of the door. I watch as he makes a feeble attempt to lift up the paper and hold it as centered as possible in front of the fisheye. It was actually difficult for me to read what it said, but after a second I realized he had written, "Pack your crap and leave," albeit more coarsely than that, in red permanent marker as he was trying to pass it off as an eviction notice. "Hey, Walt, come back when you're sober. Charlene is in here resting, doctor's orders. If you need to come back with the cops, then do it. But I'm not letting you in like that." There's a moment's silence, and then all of a sudden I see liquid coming through the mail slot on the front door. I'm wondering what he's doing, and then the smell hits me. I look back through the fisheye, and he's literally standing there with his member in his hand urinating through my mail slot while laughing. That was it. The breaking point. I grabbed my landline cordless phone because my cell was charging, and I proceeded to call the police. I make it quite well known that I witnessed his little stunt, and I was on the other line with the boys in blue. He comedically tries to run away and actually gets away the whole time, running up the street like an untucked penguin. Not a lot happens in this town. Unfortunately, the response time for the police officers aren't usually the best unless it's an honest-to-God life-threatening emergency. I'm guessing they didn't see it as such because they took a full hour to come to my address. I didn't have to do much convincing. Even though the stains on my door had dried, the smell was still quite apparent. They told me they would go over and talk to him, and if anything else came from it, we would know. And that was the entire interaction with the police. Nothing came from it, but Charlene and I had come to the decision that we were going to start looking for another place to live. The next morning, she and I head over to my sister's diner in order to have a bit of breakfast and ask her to keep her ears to the proverbial track in case anything happened to come up. And that's when the damnedest thing happens. As we're chatting, one of the patrons holds the door open for somebody in a motorized wheelchair. Normally, I wouldn't pay any mind to this. I see it as a kind act. But when the wheelchair comes through the door, its occupant throws me for a loop. It's Walter. But not just any Walter. The well-dressed, soft-spoken, easy-going Walter we first met. The difference is he's wearing a plaster cast spreading from his left knee all the way down to his toes. He barely gets in the door when he sees us sitting at the table talking to my sister. He pushes his joystick forward and wheels towards us. "I think we need to talk," is all he can get out before I fire back with, "Yeah, Walt, I think it's safe to say we do. After the stunt you pulled last night, I think it's best Charlie and I—" "That wasn't me. I'm so sorry," Walter interrupts. The three of us look at him visibly confused. He takes off his glasses and starts wiping off the lens before continuing. "So back in December, when we had that ice storm, I was putting salt pellets in my driveway. I had a bad fall after stepping on a patch of ice and broke my leg in 4 places when I landed. It was so bad the doctors had to put pins and rods in my shin bone." I take a sip of my coffee and give him a look that reads, "Okay, now you have my full attention." He pulls out his wallet and produces a picture. We take a look at it, and we can tell it's a teenage Walter, smiling his big toothy grin, still well dressed, and he's standing next to somebody. The guy in the picture with me is my twin. We're identical. The whole time you thought you were dealing with me, turns out it was Danny. I take it he never introduced himself. He has a problem with the drink. Left us estranged for quite a while. But when I got hurt, he was the only one I could turn to. I was so doped up on painkillers I could barely manage a trip to the bathroom, let alone go around collecting rent. So he offered to mend bridges and stay with me while I healed up. What in the Scooby Charlene not even hiding the fact that she was gobsmacked as the rest of us. I thought he was doing his job pretty well, at least for the first month or so. I got the money, told him thank you, and I didn't even ask how he behaved. Hell, he was trying to be good as gold, at least around me. Then a couple of the rent payments were coming up short. I found that suspicious. You're great tenants, and if we've had any kind of a shortage with rent, it's usually 20 here or there, and you take care of it when you can. The first month was 75 short. The last month, he only handed me $200. He left the house angry last night after grabbing something out of the supply drawer in my office. When the police showed up and told me, after mistaking me for him, what my brother had done, everything made sense. Oh, you won a hell of an apology. All three of us sat there speechless. This is like something out of a poorly written movie, and yet everything made sense. We looked at Walter, and he looked as if he was fighting back tears. This man was genuinely apologetic. Look, I like you kids. You treat my sister's place respectfully, you're always on time with your rent, you never complain. You're honestly the best case scenario. It would break my heart if you felt like you had to leave. Please think it over. I'm going to make this right. And that he did. We watched as he went to a separate table and whipped out his cell phone. We couldn't hear the conversation, but we could hear he had a certain sternness to his voice. I don't care. You get your butt down to the diner now, he said as he hung up. Less than half an hour goes by since the conversation with Walter. We've already finished our breakfast and paid our tab, and we're getting ready to leave when Danny walks through the door. I'm standing there dumbfounded. The man was telling the truth. He had an identical twin, and he had been the clown treating us like crap and harassing us. But, chair, now, Walter says to his brother. We watch as this much older man shuffles toward the table like an admonished child before plopping down in the seat. Walter sits there and has a conversation with him in angry yet hushed tones, before finishing with, I can take it from here. You do what needs to be done. Danny stands up in the middle of the diner and yells out, I'm sorry I harassed a horror movie dork and the chick that would have been burned at the stake where I'm from. Walter chucks a handful of sugar packets at the back of his brother's head and sits in his wheelchair with his jaw on the floor. You should be sorry over the fact that you made me look bad. You're nothing more than a miserable drunk who made these poor kids' lives hell. Even now you're trying to cause a scene. This is why I need a property manager. As far as I'm concerned, you can walk your butt out that door and stay gone. Danny got up, spit at his brother before walking out. That was the last time any of us, including Walter, saw his brother. After thinking long and hard about it, Charlene and I decided to stay. I know some of you might be thinking that the craziness of this situation would have been ample reason for us to search for a new place. But the thing is, that old man made good on his promise. For the rest of the summer, he refused to take rent from us. His tone was never anything short of apologetic any time he saw us from the day in the diner going forward. Yes, we were his tenants, but as we got to know him better, we learned he never had children. His wife passed away in 2001 from cystic fibrosis, and he viewed us as close friends due to his loneliness. Anybody hearing this story has every right to assume I'm a sucker. Most people would have cut their losses and moved on, but it was one of the last things Walter did during his time as our landlord that really showed us the kind of person he was. One Friday morning, as I was waking up with a cup of coffee after working an overnight shift, I look out in the driveway, and I see Walter's truck pulling up. Mind you, this was in the middle of the month, and so Charlene and I weren't really expecting to see him. Shortly after he pulls up, another vehicle with a real estate company logo on the side of it pulls up behind him. They're walking around taking pictures, and I'm expecting the worst. I throw on my bathrobe because it was a chilly morning and I go outside. Walter sees me standing on the porch and just smiles at me. I get the impression like I was reading too far into the situation, but I still asked what was going on. He tells me that he knows his health hasn't been so great as of late, and he can't keep up with maintaining the property anymore, let alone being a landlord. The person from the real estate company is a property assessor. He wanted to surprise us and figured we would be at work. He noticed my car sitting in the driveway, and he was trying to be as quiet as possible, but now the cat was out of the bag. He came up onto my porch and sat down in one of the 2 wicker chairs we had by the front door and patted his hand on the second one, indicating for me to sit down next to him. "I'm just putting this out on the table. If you feel like you would rather rent to own, I'm on board with that. Let me see what the assessor says, and I'll get back to you within the next couple of days. Think about it. Don't give me an answer right away." I go inside and I tell Charlene what just went down as she was coming out of the bathroom from taking a shower and getting prepped for work. She just raises an eyebrow and says, "Things just got interesting. Let's see what he says." A couple of days later, my store manager tells me my landlord called and asked me to give him a buzz during my break. He said it wasn't an emergency and not to worry. So I'm munching on a Caesar salad as I give him a phone call. He answers the phone without a beat and says, $65,000. I'll handle the costs out of pocket when it comes down to closing and any paperwork. I almost choke in my lunch before responding, "Wait, what?" Walter chuckles and says, "Look, I wasn't kidding when I said I was sorry for the way my brother treated you. I wasn't kidding when I said I consider you and your friend part of the family. And that's what I'm doing. I'm looking out for my family. The assessor said the house was worth $85,000. I'll knock 20 off for you two if you decide you're going to take it over." After a long conversation, Charlene and I decided that's exactly what we were going to do. Flash forward to today. Walter was able to help get the house structured in such a way that the mortgage was fair. We went through all the proper channels and got the paperwork out of the way in order for the house to be ours once all was said and done. I finished paying the place off in 2018, and I still live in that little corner of Connecticut. About 3 years in, Charlene moved out on her own after meeting her partner through her job. Her husband is an antiques dealer who was taking some time to himself when he decided to stop off at the shop in town. The rest, as they say, is history. Walter's health took a turn for the worst in late 2017, and he sadly passed at home one night in his sleep. Up until that point, he would still periodically apologize for his brother's behavior. He never let that go, right up until his dying day. But in a weird way, I'm almost thankful Danny was such a massive tool bag, because I honestly don't know if I would be a homeowner in a place I would come to see as my dream town before the age of 40. Hell, most people my age aren't even lucky enough to get out from under the thumb of whatever landlord they had to deal with due to the country's housing crisis. So, Danny, even though you proved the evil twin theory to be true, you also indirectly proved that kind people like your brother still exist. I don't know what your plan was, if you had a plan. Maybe you didn't like the fact that people were living in your sister's house. Maybe you wanted the house yourself. And maybe I'm reading too far into things. But I'd like to think that whatever scheme you had backfired in glorious fashion, and you're left stewing over the whole thing when or if you stop to think about it. At the end of every day, when I go to sleep in my own bed, wake up in my own room in my own house, I can only be thankful that you gave your brother a reason to try to do the right thing, and he followed through beautifully. 4. So my friend Jeremy shared a story about our Town Fall Festival in video number 176 for Idiots in the Wild. My name is Alan, and I'm his former partner. It was pretty cool to see his evolution when he first started out. He went from splashing crap onto a shirt to really putting the effort in. Thing is, he drives a really tiny car, which would make it borderline impossible for him to tote his equipment and shirts back and forth. I offered to help, and he went so far as to make me a shirt and get a graphic professionally printed on it. I still have that shitty tie-dye shirt hanging up in my closet towards the back, even though I don't wear it anymore. We had some good times. So basically, I'm his former partner because my main source of income is a job that is absolutely exhausting. I work for a septic company that handles a little bit of everything, and I am employed by the town that holds the festival. It works for me because I only live 5 minutes away. But I still remember that day he was talking about. He did his best to hold it together while his son was around, and after we packed up and headed home for the day, he started telling me about the Change It guy. If I'm being honest, I was focusing on the road and only kind of half listening. So when I heard the video and I heard the guy's description, I knew who he was talking about right away. Now, I've had this job with this particular company for about 3.5 years now. We got the contract with the town 2 years ago, and I'm one of the main people they contact whenever something needs to be fixed or checked out. This particular person has a nickname, Braindead Bob. The first time I heard it, I actually thought it was kind of nasty. I had to do a bit of work at the apartment complex where this guy was working. A massive septic clog that was draining into a few of the rooms. I did all of my troubleshooting, and came to realize that it was due to some sort of massive clog within the buildings in the wall pipe system. It was due to this knowledge that I ended up having to work with another coworker and go apartment to apartment in order to systematically tackle the problem, and when we finally got to Bob's apartment, he started chatting with us. I am the type of person who gets absolutely absorbed in whatever he's doing, and I wasn't paying much attention because I was running a high-end plumber snake with a camera through 50 feet of pipe in his bathroom. Started with the sink, nothing. Went to the shower, aside from a couple of minor hair clogs, nothing again. He's still trying to strike up this conversation with me, and I can tell he's getting insulted when I'm not engaging. Well, after eliminating the sink and the shower from the equation, the only place left was the toilet. I ready my equipment once more, and when I lift the lid to the toilet, I'm met with a ghastly sight. He had at least a couple of days of unflushed water in the bowl, and when I questioned him about it, he got insulted. He even went as far as to tell me he would report me to my supervisor because he felt so insulted. I literally asked the guy how long this toilet had been clogged, and if he had tried to move the clog with a plunger or Drano. I had to know, especially if he used acidic drain cleaner, if there was a chance he had broken up the clog or pushed it further down the pipe. He keeps saying he's going to report me to my supervisor, and I finally tell him to do it. I tell him I'm doing my job and my supervisor wasn't going to do anything about the fact that I was asking him a basic line of questioning. He just threw his hands up in a huff and walked out of the room. At that point, I knew I wasn't getting anywhere with him, so I just ran the camera through the nastiest toilet I'd encountered up until that point. I'd say I got about 20 to 25 feet into the pipe, and I find the block. It's at a junction. And what is it I find? Somebody managed to flush a pair of latex gloves and what appeared to be a washcloth, and it got snagged on some old buildup in the pipe. It took a bit of doing, and after God knows how long, we got the problem fixed. When I asked him if there was a possibility that he had somehow flushed his stuff down the toilet, he got mad at me and blamed his wife. Here's the deal. He blames his wife for everything. But there is no wife. Not anymore. It's pretty well known around town that this lawyer he keeps talking about was his divorce lawyer, and he lost the case in spectacular fashion. If we're being honest, it's a good thing Jeremy shut him down while his son was around, and before Bob's language got colorful. Because 1 second he'll tell anybody who's willing to listen, and about how much of a harpy his ex-wife is, and then the next second he's looking to buy gifts for her in order to try and win her back. I feel for the guy in this instance, I really do. But as I got to know him, and more about him through my line of work, I started to understand his ex-wife's perspective. If a stranger were to encounter Bob, I would be willing to believe the first impression they would get is that he's a little on the slow side, not at all there. And though that person wouldn't necessarily be wrong, it's not due to any kind of mental disability or anything along those lines. It definitely isn't all there, but it's because of his habits. You see, when he enters a business in the area, people watch him like a hawk. He's known for having sticky fingers, and he's been known to pilfer anything from Benadryl to keyboard cleaner. The man certainly has a problem, and it's public knowledge. If I was a betting man, I would put money on the fact that he was higher than a giraffe's butthole when he came to the festival that day, because, spoiler alert, he almost always is. I remember I was stopping off for a bite to eat at the little diner at the end of town. A public landmark with a bit of history, mind you. And he's sitting at a table that's within my line of sight. The man keeps slumping in his chair and he looks to be completely out of it. The waitress brings his food over, one of their meager breakfast specials, ham and eggs, and as he attempts to cut his fried egg with a fork, he's doing so in such a violent fashion, he ends up flinging it across the room. In this moment of embarrassed clarity that washes across his face, he asks for his check. The waitress goes back to the register in order to print it up. And I watch as he takes his silverware, wraps it up in a napkin, and sticks it in his pocket. Bear in mind, I've seen this guy's apartment before. He's not hurting as badly as he lets on. It's a fairly nice place, really nice furniture, and though he may have gotten it from a rent-a-center in the area, he at the very least gives off the illusion he's living pretty well for a divorcee. He leaves a $10 bill on his table once the check arrives, leaving a massive $1 tip for the waitress, by the way. And he tries to make his way out the door as if he didn't just pull the most petty theft job I've ever seen. The same waitress comes over and refills my coffee, and I point out the window as he makes his way across the parking lot. You know, he just pocketed every bit of silverware at his table. The waitress lets out a deep sigh and rolls her eyes at me before responding, "Of course he did." And that was his secret. He would steal just enough to call attention to himself, but never enough to warrant police involvement. But the thing is, during the summer leading up to that event, he started to become more brazen. So, there's a family-owned thrift store in town. My sister is friends with a couple of the employees there. One day, she's talking about a conversation she had with one of those friends. Apparently, somebody waltzed into the store fitting Bob's description. He walked around, browsing through the clothing racks, all the while telling girls working there he was looking for a summer dress for his wife. He convinced a girl to look in the back at things that were getting ready to go out on the rack later in the day, because he was looking for a specific print and size. She went to the back to look around, and when she came back he was gone. And so was a rather nice leather jacket that was previously displayed on a mannequin by the exit. Turns out the thrift store was asking a little over $100 for it, because it was worth at least double that. Up until that point, the family was a little too trusting, and they didn't have security cameras, so this person got away without consequence, and a gently used $100 leather jacket. After that, they installed cameras and did away with the mindset that if somebody stole clothing from a thrift store, they needed it more than this store, especially after they learned of Bob's reputation. I could get into so many stories based around this character, but by the time I was done doing that, we would have several chapters and I'm not going to overtake this video. The thing is, the story about his lawyer, his ex-wife, and the need to get her a gift became a tell of sorts. He would always get into this in order to distract the person or annoy them to the point where they ignored him, so he could pocket one thing or another. Again, Jeremy shutting him down turned out to be a good thing in more ways than one. I'm going to be done in a moment, but I wanted to mention this. A little later on in the week after the festival, good old Bob got a bit of comeuppance. I didn't know he was aware of the fact that everybody, and I mean everybody, as far as town business owners are concerned, knew to keep an eye on him. But people talk in small towns, and this was the case. We have a pharmacy, and a couple of doctors' offices not even 2 blocks apart from each other. I've been using the pharmacy for a couple of years now, and occasionally I strike up conversation with the pharmacist, as long as they're not busy. I may miss a detail or two, but for the most part, this is what he told me during one of those conversations. Somebody was breaking into those little metal boxes that, if I'm not mistaken, are meant for medication disposal and delivery. I'm not 100%, but I'm almost certain that's what they are. In any case, one of the doctors got in contact with the pharmacist to let them know what was going on. Sure enough, they look up to see Bob wearing a leather jacket that's 2 sizes too big for him. He appears to be stuffing merchandise into his pockets. The pharmacist has his assistant make a subtle phone call to the police department, that is literally one building over, A uniformed officer shows up and plays it cool. Bob has no idea he is there, but he's watching as Bob's pockets get fatter and fatter. As he looks up to see the officer and attempts to make a hasty exit, the officer's partner is outside waiting by the exit. He gets both of his feet out the door before the other officer snatches him by the arm, before marching him back into the store. They make him empty his pockets on the counter, and he starts pulling bottles of NyQuil, boxes of NyQuil, a couple of bottles of rubber cement, cans of keyboard cleaner, laundry pens, and lastly, a couple of bottles of prescription pills that were prescribed to a woman on the counter. Now the cops are able to get him on concealment, petty larceny, and possession of a controlled substance that wasn't prescribed to him. Apparently one of those meds has street value. Now, in all honesty, I'm not one of those people who kicks a guy when he's down. But I can't stand a thief. Any goodwill or understanding I had towards Bob went right out of the window the more and more I heard about him. There was even a plausible rumor going around town that he had been breaking into people's cars if left unlocked in a few of the parking lots located behind a couple of the businesses. Somebody's cell phone went missing right out of the dashboard mount in the 2 or so minutes it took them to go inside and pay a bill. Another woman who kept a handheld taser in her glove box came back to her car only to see the compartment open, and after searching her car, the taser missing. So for a while there, Bob was an afterthought. Thinking about it, even now nobody really talks about him anymore. I didn't really follow up on his case, but I'm going to believe he got a bit of time handed to him. So yeah, if that person seems a little too standoffish, or a little too talkative, it's probably not the worst idea to be a bit more on the defensive than you would usually be. I would have hated to see my friend have inventory he worked so hard on stolen from him because some sticky-fingered, ex-wife-obsessed grifter managed to get under his skin and cause just enough of a distraction in order for him to do so. So, I would like to say just one thing to Bob. If by some small miracle you happen to hear this video, you need help. Like yesterday. Nobody in town trusts you, and it's because of your own actions. Shape up, and if you're unwilling to do so, just know we're all onto you. 5. So I have this friend that just kinda acts like the world revolves around her. She'll block you in the blink of an eye, yet almost everything she does is 50 times worse than what you did to her. Claim 1. She hates when people say that something she did was wrong and will defend whatever outrageous thing she did with her life. Claim 2. She overall is just someone that likes to put others down for no reason. Claim 3. I'll start with claim 1. There was this one time that she blocked me for months because I didn't give her my assigned seat. We're still at school. I always let her sit there, and I would normally pull up a chair. The desks were arranged into tables, because I was always late and she would get there before me. That one day I got there before her, so I sat in my assigned seat. She got there and demanded that I got up. I told her that it was technically my seat. She said that she was sat there and I always pulled up a chair, so I should just pull one up. I said back that I let her sit there because I was always late and she got there before me. I asked why she wouldn't pull up a chair. She got mad and said I was being extra, and called me a bitch before sitting at her actual assigned seat. I tried to message her after school to apologize, but she had already blocked me. The second time she blocked me was only for 5 days, but I feel like it wasn't really justified. We were in art class, working on a group project. We included an eagle in the drawing. The person that drew the sketch gave the eagle no legs. We made a small joke about it and continued drawing. She was drawing the final drawing. She also drew the eagle without any legs, and I wanted to make a small joke, so I did. I giggled and said, "Why did you draw it like that?" I meant it in a light-hearted way, and it said something similar to the first eagle drawing. She immediately started yelling at me to shut the F up, because I couldn't draw any better. The teacher was the one that actually told her to stop. I was honestly really shocked, so I just stammered out a small sorry, and we left. After school, I wanted to apologize better because I assumed that she was just stressed out because we were running out of time. I tried to message her, but I was blocked. About 5 days later, she randomly started talking to me again. During art class, she laughed at me because I was judging her when I couldn't draw very well. The third time, it wasn't me that she blocked, but it was one of my best friends. Just so it isn't too confusing, I'll call this friend Enya. This happened around the time that she blocked me for the first time. She said that Enya was a fake friend. I really didn't know much about the reasons for this, that's all I was told. I would like to say that Enya is one of the best, nicest, and most supportive people I've met, so it really surprised me that this was the reason for her blocking Enya. The second time that Enya was blocked was because they had something happen in their home life, and didn't really want to talk to anyone. Because of that, Enya changed her status so others wouldn't message her. About 3 days later, she messaged Alma but forgot to update her status again. Alma then messaged me saying that Enya was just seeking attention. When I told Anya that Enya doesn't normally talk to others when she's upset, so it's not really something you can get mad at her for, Alma just kinda dismissed it and blocked her anyway. I'm not really sure what claim this next story would fall under, but this one seems right. So me and Alma were sitting next to each other in class after she unblocked me the first time, but before the second time. We got candy for something. We were joking around and I jokingly tapped her forehead with my candy bar. It was still wrapped, so I wasn't getting chocolate on her or anything. Her response was to slap me in the face with the back of her hand. I asked her why she did that, and she said I should never have touched her. She never told me about her boundaries when it came to touching, so I didn't know. Claim 2. Alma is in a lot of Discord servers, and in one, there was someone that had a crush on her. I think that person did something bad and Alma stopped talking to them. The person tried to apologize and said they were going to KTS if Alma didn't respond. She didn't respond, and a few months later she messaged the person, and they didn't respond. Alma then came to the conclusion that they actually did it. I'm not defending what this person said by any means, but what Alma did after thinking that was the reason for someone doing such a thing was horrible. She laughed about it. She would laugh if anyone brought it up and even bragged about it. Another thing happened in a different Discord server. Someone in the server posted a pic of a knife and made a poll asking if they should do it. The it in this case being obvious. Alma voted yes to this poll and then sent me a screenshot of it. She was joking about how she was the only person to say yes. I asked her why she would do that and she kept making excuses. She said that this person was mentally ill for asking that. She said it wasn't like she was putting the knife in their hand and telling them to do it. She said that the person wasn't going to actually do it. She said that the person was only seeking attention. She said that if they did do it, then they were an idiot. I told her that none of that made it okay for her to say that to someone for no reason. She simply responded with a yawning emoji, asking me if I was done yet. Claim 3. Alma obviously isn't horrible to just random people, but to her friends, too. We have this one friend that is barely overweight that she loves to call fat at every opportunity. She is also really fond of calling him stupid. This next friend I call Sabine. Me and Sabine had a friend that once made a joke about confessing her feelings to her. After that, he clarified that it was a joke, and Sabine never had feelings for him, so it wasn't taken badly or anything. Once Alma found out, she said of course it was a joke. Who would like her fat butt? When asked why she would say that, she just said it was the truth. I know I didn't see the real extent that she bullied others to, but that's all I can remember right now. As for me, Alma loved to call me names. She called me fat if I did anything like eating. She did this to lots of people, so this wasn't really special for her. She always had backhanded compliments for me. They normally were just calling me dumb, saying, even insert random person, understood it faster than you. She knows that I am trans, but loved to call me flat. Alma always said, you're just jealous of me because you're flat and I'm not. I always responded with, no, I'm not, I'm trans, you know that. And Alma always said, just saying, like it was meant to make me feel bad. I was never good at drawing, and Alma was, so she always had something negative to say about anything I drew. I once drew something for a project and showed it to her because I was proud of it. She said, "You used a reference for the hair, didn't you?" I told her yes, and she said, "I knew you couldn't come up with that." It made me feel really bad about something I was initially proud of. She liked to drag on jokes that put others down. She once said that I was as black as something the color black. I kinda just awkwardly laughed at it. Apparently, that was an invitation to continue. She then went on to list about 20 different things that were the color black that she could see. When you thought that she was done, she would say one more. She even started calling my name a slur. She said that it was an insult to call anyone by my name. Alma was used to being referred to as the entitled friend, if that wasn't clear. That's kinda it. I can't think of anything else. All this happened in the span of about 3 years. If you think I need some criticism, don't be afraid to give it. Before I go, I realized I didn't give a piece of information that might be important to the story. So, Alma blocked me and Enya for the first time around the same time. It was during the last half of the year, and our entire friend group just dropped her, removed her from group chats, and stopped talking at school. None of us talked to her for the rest of the school year and the entire summer. Early in the next school year, she started to talk to us again because most of us had core classes together. We all know that she is really problematic, and most of the problems within our friend group start with her. We just agreed not to start any sort of drama with her, hence us still talking to her. I know it doesn't make much sense, but we all just want a school experience without drama. Hellfreezer's note: it sounds like your friend has chosen to make herself a pariah, so it really would be healthy for everyone all round if she got the very harsh lesson of learning that you can't treat people like that. She sounds like a nasty little person, really. No one needs that in their lives. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, episode 177. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do hit the like button and share the video with friends and family. And also subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you'd like early access to the videos, you can get that through my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. You can also get it by becoming a member of the channel. There are 3 different tiers. One of them gives you a membership. I can't remember which one, but one of them gives you early access to the videos. The others have different benefits. Okay, let's see. No other bits of business today, I don't think, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... we're moving out of the summer weather now, at least I think we are. So when do you stop tending your garden? Give it the last cut of the year. For me, it's usually, I think, right about October. Then I'm done till, because it doesn't really grow much after that in my experience. Then I'm done till the following year. But some people seem to do it later, so let me know what you think. How do you do it? Leave your answers in a comment below. And before I go, let's have a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And this one comes from Idiots in the Wild 176, and was about when do you stop trick-or-treating. And today's answer comes from S. Nixon. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I was 16 or 17. Not really my fault. My sister, who was about 11 or 12 at the time, wanted me to go trick-or-treating with her and her friend. So I did. People assumed I was younger than I actually was, as I actually looked like I was in my early teens. So the people handing out candy didn't know my actual age. Not that I was ever asked. Thank you very much for your answer, S. Nixon. I hope the extra free candy made it worth the trip of being chaperone. With that, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time. Actually, no, before I go, I finally become a real YouTube man, and I've started a second channel. I'm going to be moving at least This Week in Hell over there. I've also moved the Baby Reindeer video. It's deleted from this channel, so if you want to watch it, you have to watch it over there. The Baby Reindeer review I did, talking about some personal experiences as well. And the news show will continue weekly after this week? Or is it this week? Oh no, it'll be this week, because I record a week ahead. So no This Week in Hell on this channel this week, but it is on the new channel, which is just under my new name. I will include a link in videos from now on. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.